Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. A married couple, Jay and Beth, taking a celebratory camping trip a year after Beth's cancer remission. But they find themselves trapped between a wild madman and a skin stealing monster. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Consumed. Well, folks, you know when Devon Sawa has a movie out, we have to cover it because our boy Luke here is a big fan of Idle Hands and Chucky and The Final Destination. You know, all of these wonderful legacy properties
Little
that Devon
Giants.
Sawa has found himself in. Little Giants, yes. But I'm also a growing fan of this gentleman here. He is somebody that I definitely saw him in a ton of things growing up, but just
Little
never
Giants.
fully, yes, Little Giants, but just never fully like grasped onto it, I think, until much later. It was honestly, I grew a much deeper appreciation for the Chucky TV series. There we go. And then it was The Final Destination. Yeah, I went back and watched that first original film after seeing all the sequels for so long. And I literally went back and said, wow, this guy is actually pretty fucking good. So
Did
when
you
he's
like
in a
Little
movie,
Giants?
yeah, Little Giants is great. I grew up with it. Okay. Anyway, guys, we're talking Consumed. This is a creature feature, and it has to do with a Wendigo, maybe. Yeah, this was one that was on my list for films to watch out for August. This was one that was again very funny because Luke knew nothing about it. I had requested it. We got the screener, and I said, "Hey, Devon Sawa's in it. It's a monster movie," and he said, "Sign me up." So, Luke, now that we've seen Consumed, how do you feel about it?
You know, it's a movie. Yeah, these ones are a struggle, I guess. I think Wendigo films are becoming like werewolf films for me, where you're going into them and you're very hesitant because you don't know what route they're going to take. What was that film we watched? Was it Cold Meats?
Cold Meats, yes, Cold
And I think
Meats.
that was at the beginning of the year, and that one, they don't deliver on anything promised, so you never know. These things are such a question mark here. And I'll be honest, I think it delivers in some sense of what it could not have delivered, in a particular point, which we'll dive into. But from a storytelling perspective, there just wasn't much here, unfortunately. It's, they present, I think the log line for this film is way more interesting than the film itself, unfortunately.
Yeah, I found myself quickly falling into the same old when this movie got about into the 15-minute mark. There's a sequence that happens, it's at night, it involves a tent, and where that should be where the film is ramping up finally, I kind of found myself being like, okay, this is a slower kind of ramp up than I was anticipating. This is not really grabbing me like I would like, because I think when you do a film like this, it's a concept, maybe not the creature, but the concept and the way it's presented in itself has been done so many times that you really got to just kind of hit hard and keep going. This film decides to really play it safe, I feel. And then by the time we actually get to our creature and what we've kind of been waiting for, it just feels like it's all little too late. And, I don't think it's the worst. I think that this is much more enjoyable than Cold Meat. But I think that as just as simple as a concept as this is, I didn't feel like there was enough meat on the bone. I just felt like just not enough of anything.
Yeah, and this is a smaller film, so when you go into it, I think what they present here, this takes mostly, well, I think almost, well, yeah, I'm all out in the woods. I can't think of any other scene that is not.
Mm-mm.
So, when you look at those smaller films, an external location like that doesn't necessarily surprise me. So I was like, okay, this makes sense. So, it falls in lines with a lot of smaller film type of storytelling, but and with that, that's not a bad thing. I think that presents, acting ability wise, we expect a little more out of our actors because they're having those opportunities. Now, when we look at this, this is a couple that are our main focus here. And, one of our characters is, in cancer remission. So, for that, that kind of caught my interest of, okay, we're having some chapters to these characters. They're not just, we have a little bit of a texture. They're not just kind of coming in and, hey, it's a volatile relationship and that's the way we go with this. We have a bit of a backstory here. They're kind of out celebrating, So looking at that, I was like, okay, maybe we're going to have some interesting directions for our characters. Unfortunately, the dynamic between our characters in a relationship never really hit for me. It was never really believable. It felt like it was actors delivering lines, and when we have this opportunity to really show our range of acting, I was pleased to see Devon Sawa come up and, they gave him some actual lines. I was scared that he was only going to be in this for like 2 minutes and then he was going to hit the happy trail. But, we have some scenes with Devon Sawa, which he puts on a performance. The other ones for me, not so much. It was something where it left a lot to be desired on their end.
I think that the problem necessarily isn't the actors. I bought them for the most part. I think it just comes down to the writing of it. It just feels like the characters never got fleshed out enough. It's kind of like they deal with the same issue constantly. And it's not really until we get Devon Sawa that I feel like some kind of variety starts to come in to the script. And I think like that's why his role is probably the strongest, because you could just tell that the writer finally found some footing that made the story more interesting. And I know it's like we're not selling this movie too hard, but I mean it's unfortunately it's not like this is terribly unwatchable. Like, I think it's got some interesting ideas. It's just terribly samey. It doesn't do anything that I haven't seen a dozen times before. And when you are a low budget creature feature like this, I feel like you have to kind of lean into less is more in the creativity. And this film, although I will give them credit, they do give us a monster. By the time you see it, you kind of wonder, why did you go this route with it when you clearly didn't have the budget to make it work? You should have found a different way to make this more interesting.
Yeah, and I think for me throughout, I had a problem feeling any sort of tension, even when our creature is introduced. It feels like, in those moments, okay, we have some sort of stakes, but then when we're out of those elements and it's just our characters back together, I never really buy the interactions there. It's nothing like where I'm bored watching it. It just felt like it's just kind of there, unfortunately, where it's not offensively bad or anything like that. It's just kind of, it's a movie. It's something to pass the time for me. So it wasn't ever anything that really absolutely compelled me. It was just kind of, I'm watching a movie. So, other than having Devon Sawa on screen, which always works for me, but, other than that, there really just wasn't much here. And that's where, we look at werewolf movies, and a lot of times the norm is they don't actually present a creature, and it just becomes some sort of metaphorical or allegorical, storytelling. This one, they, like Dylan said, they actually do present a Wendigo of sorts here. So for me, they got bonus points because I think they're becoming more the norm of not delivering any sort of creature, and we're supposed to pick up some sort of metaphor for it. So I was intrigued from that standpoint of that this creature does exist, and I had my moments of am I seeing this, or is this gonna all pop up to not be true? But they do deliver in that aspect of it. Now, does it work from a visual standpoint? No. But it is there. I'm not overly well versed in Wendigo films, but I'm assuming that a lot of them are not going to be delivering. So for me, it got bonus points for that. But other than that, story wise, they have some texture to it, but it's never actually presented upon. So for me, I'm going to give this one worth a watch just because in terms of Wendigo films, I feel this one may be a little more satisfying for an audience than some of the other ones that are out there. But, in general horror, I don't know if this is going to work for a lot of people.
And I will say, being the more seasoned creature feature watcher out of the two of us, if I've watched all kinds of garbage, I have to go with proceed with caution, just because for me, I think that this movie could have been more fun Because again, like they could have had more fun with the idea. They could have had a little bit more, just give us maybe a few more characters, even if they're like lighter on, because everybody's light on development anyway. So it's like, why not have some cool kills? Why not actually kind of give us something a little bit more? Maybe lean into the Sci-Fi Channel original kind of side to this. I just feel like this movie takes itself a little too seriously for what we're working with. And I do love Devon Sawa. I think he's great in this as well. I thought that his character, again, brings some life to it. But again, especially when you're dealing with a creature, the way that they present it, it's just kind of one of those things where I'm like, why didn't you just decide, let's just forego the metaphors, let's forego the serious nature of it, and let's just fucking go for it. Let's just have some fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know tonally if that would have worked for them when you're dealing with a character in cancer remission. It would have
Yeah,
just been kind of interesting dynamic that they would have had. I see what you're saying. I just think, they were going for a more serious tone here. I think they thought the
and that
scenes were going to be more compelling than they actually were. Unfortunately, I do think that is, for me, an acting standpoint, as well as a dialogue standpoint, just because nothing there really grabbed me. So, I think tonally, I just don't know where they wanted to go with it. 100%.
yeah, it's a very mixed bag. But yeah, guys, that's what we have for Consumed. Definitely let us know if you vibe with this one a little bit more than we did. Again, I think that this is a small movie, so we're gonna say go out and support it, especially if this is something you're interested in. I think that one day somebody's gonna knock this out of the park, just like we say with werewolf films. We've seen great werewolf films. We know somebody's going to bring it back at some point. I think somebody will crack the Wendigo code. It's just gotta
You've
be
got to
better than what we've had. We gotta kind of go in a different direction than where we're going with it right now. So that's all we have to say about that. Other than that, we got a lot of great stuff up on the channel. Lots of Alien Romulus coverage. That was kind of the theme the last week here. We did a little hot takes video talking about Prometheus, which we had a lot of fun doing that, as well as we cracked down on all of the spoilers for Alien Romulus. Luke and I talked for about an hour and then 15, 20 minutes or so. It was crazy. It was a blast. And yeah, if you've seen the film, check that video out. So other than that, it's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.